Snow slammed against the cockpit windshield of the Boeing 787, turning the lights of Denver International Airport into a blurry kaleidoscope of ice and anxiety. Inside the flight deck, the hum of the avionics provided a stark, technological contrast to the raw fury of the blizzard raging outside. It was 8:15 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and the world beyond the glass was a frozen white void. But inside, the temperature was rising fast. Maya Robinson brushed the fresh snowflakes from the shoulders of her navy blue coat before stepping fully into the small, illuminated space. She was a woman of 50, with skin the color of deep mahogany and silver-streaked hair pulled back into an immaculate bun. She carried herself not just with the posture of a pilot, but with the quiet, unshakable grace of someone who had weathered more storms than just the weather. She placed her flight bag down with a soft thud, her eyes briefly scanning the maintenance logbook left open on the central console. She lingered on the fuel gauge readings for a fraction of a second, a detail most would miss, but one she had flown halfway across the country specifically to check. "First Officer Robinson, reporting for duty, Captain," she said, her voice smooth and professional, cutting through the silence. Captain Brock Holloway didn't turn around. He was hunched over the flight management computer, his fingers stabbing at the buttons with aggressive impatience. He was a handsome man in his 40s, with the kind of sharp jawline that usually graced airline recruitment posters. But tonight, his face was tight with stress. He checked his watch, then the clock on the panel, ignoring her completely. "Captain," Maya repeated, stepping closer. "Operations said you were down a pilot due to illness. I'm here to help get us to Chicago." Brock finally spun his chair around. His eyes swept over her, taking in her face, her age, and her uniform. There was no warmth in his gaze, only a cold, curdling disdain. He let out a short, derisive scoff. "Robinson? Operations said they were sending a replacement, not a diversity poster child." The air in the cockpit seemed to thin. Maya didn't flinch. She had heard variations of that tone for 30 years. She simply extended her hand, steady and inviting. "I have 20 years of flight experience, Captain. I'm type-rated for this aircraft. Shall we start the pre-flight checklist? The passengers are anxious to get home." Brock looked at her hand as if it were something dirty. He didn't take it. Instead, he stood up, looming over her in the cramped space, using his height to intimidate. "I don't know who you know in HR, lady, but I don't fly with amateurs. And I certainly don't fly with quotas." He took a step forward, forcing her to step back toward the door. "Don't touch anything. Get out of my cockpit before I have security drag you out." The wind howled outside, rattling the frame of the jet, but the silence between them was louder. Maya stood her ground, her chin lifting slightly. She looked him dead in the eye, her voice dropping an octave, deadly calm. "This isn't your cockpit, Brock. It belongs to the airline. And right now you are delaying Christmas." Brock's laugh was sharp and cruel, cutting through the hum of the avionics like a knife. "You think you can lecture me on my plane?" He shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips that didn't reach his cold eyes. He brushed past her, moving from the pilot's seat to the cockpit doorway, intentionally bumping her shoulder as he grabbed the public address microphone. "Watch this. I'm going to show you exactly how much authority you have here." He keyed the mic, his voice instantly shifting from aggressive to a practiced, apologetic baritone that oozed false sincerity. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Holloway speaking from the flight deck. I am terribly sorry to announce a further delay." Inside the first-class cabin and bleeding back into economy, the collective groan was immediate and heavy. Passengers who had just settled into their seats, shivering from the jet bridge cold and hoping for a timely departure, looked up with weary eyes. Brock continued, staring directly at Maya with a vindictive glint as he spoke to the cabin. "It seems the airline has compromised our safety standards tonight. They have sent an unqualified co-pilot to fill our vacancy. For your safety and my own conscience, I refuse to fly this aircraft until she is removed and replaced with a competent professional." The reaction was instantaneous and volatile. The cabin erupted into a cacophony of frustration. A businessman in seat 3A slammed his laptop shut, his face reddening. "We just want to get home. It's Christmas Eve," he shouted. Further back, a young mother clutched a crying baby, looking desperate and exhausted. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the open cockpit door, landing on Maya. Because of Brock's lie, they didn't see a pilot with 20 years of experience. They saw an obstacle. They saw the person standing between them and their families. Phones were raised, cameras recording the scene, capturing Maya standing stoically in the doorway while the captain played the hero. Nancy, the head flight attendant, looked horrified. She had been flying with Vista for 15 years, and she could feel the mood in the cabin turning dangerous. She stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she touched Brock's arm, trying to de-escalate the situation. "Captain, please," she whispered urgently, trying to keep her voice low. "We are already behind schedule. The de-icing trucks are waiting. We can't do this right now." Brock spun on her, his veneer of politeness vanishing instantly. "Shut up, Nancy," he snapped, his voice booming loud enough for the first 5 rows to hear clearly. "Do your job or get out with her. I don't need flight attendants questioning me. I need you to pass out peanuts and stay out of the way." Nancy shrank back, humiliated, tears pricking her eyes at the public dressing down. That was the line. Maya, who had stood motionless through the insults directed at herself, moved instantly. She stepped in front of Nancy, shielding the other woman from Brock's aggression with her own body. Her posture was not one of submission, but of absolute command. "Speak to your crew with respect, Captain," Maya said, her voice low but projecting clearly through the sudden silence of the front cabin. "She is a professional, not a servant. And you are embarrassing the uniform you wear." The cabin went quiet, stunned by the steel in her voice. Brock's face turned purple. He felt his control slipping, his performance ruined by her defiance in front of his audience. He stepped into her personal space, pointing a shaking finger at Maya's chest. "That's it. You're done. I'm calling the regional director to fire you personally." The sound of heavy footsteps sprinting down the jet bridge silenced the angry murmurs of the first-class cabin. The rhythmic thudding against the metal floor grew louder and more frantic with every second, signaling an arrival that was anything but routine. Brock's face lit up with a smug, predatory satisfaction. He turned to the passengers, spreading his hands as if he were a magician presenting his finale. "You see," Brock announced, his voice booming with vindication. "I told you I would handle this. That's the regional director coming to escort this imposter off the property. Justice is swift." He turned his gaze back to Maya, his eyes narrowing into slits of pure malice. "Time to go, sweetheart. Try not to make a scene when security handcuffs you." Maya didn't move. She didn't look at the door. She kept her eyes locked on Brock, her expression unreadable, almost bored. The tension in the galley was thick enough to choke on, broken only when the cabin door flew open, letting a gust of freezing wind and snow swirl into the warm aircraft. Mr. Thompson, the regional director of Vista Airlines, burst into the cabin. He was a man usually known for his immaculate suits and composed demeanor, but tonight he was a wreck. His coat was soaked with melting snow, his tie was askew, and his chest was heaving as he gasped for air, his face pale with terror. He scanned the scene frantically, ignoring the security guard who had trailed behind him. Brock stepped forward, puffing out his chest to greet his superior. "Thompson, finally. I'm glad you got my message. I need you to get this woman off my flight immediately, so we can." Thompson didn't even look at him. He pushed past Brock as if the captain were a piece of furniture, his eyes fixed solely on the woman standing calmly by the cockpit door. The director stumbled to a halt in front of her, wiped the sweat and melted snow from his forehead, and did something that made the entire cabin gasp. He bowed his head. It was a gesture of deep, terrified respect. "Chairwoman Robinson," Thompson wheezed, his voice trembling loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am so sorry. I got here as soon as I saw your signal. I didn't know you were in Denver. Is everything all right?" The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the plane. The passengers, who seconds ago were shouting for Maya's removal, froze with their phones still raised. Nancy covered her mouth with her hand. Brock stood paralyzed, his arms still half raised in a greeting that would never be returned. His brain seemed unable to process the words. "Chairwoman?" "No, Mr. Thompson," Maya said softly. She reached into the pocket of her blazer. Brock flinched, perhaps expecting a weapon, But what she pulled out was far more dangerous to him. It was a lanyard holding a heavy platinum ID card, the kind that only one person in the entire company possessed. It caught the cabin lights, shimmering with absolute authority. She held it up, letting it dangle inches from Brock's pale face. Maya turns the ID card toward Brock, her eyes piercing him. "Captain Holloway, do you know who signs your paychecks? Because you're looking at her." The color drained from Brock's face, so fast he looked like a ghost haunting his own cockpit. "Chairwoman Robinson," he stammered, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. He blinked rapidly, looking from the platinum ID card to Maya's impassive face, his brain struggling to reconcile the diversity hire he had insulted with the woman who owned the very ground he stood on. The silence in the cabin broke. Whispers spread like wildfire down the rows of seats. "That's the owner? Did you hear that? He's finished." The passengers, who had been ready to revolt against Maya, now turned their phone cameras toward Brock, sensing the shift in the wind. Brock tried to laugh, a hollow, desperate sound. He took a half step back, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender that came too late. I didn't know it was you, ma'am. I was just following safety protocol. You have to understand, right? I was protecting the passengers. If I had known." Maya stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the galley floor. She didn't shout, but her voice projected clearly, carrying to every passenger straining to listen. "Safety? You didn't check my credentials, Brock. You checked my skin color. You didn't ask for my flight hours. You assumed my incompetence because I didn't look like you." She gestured to the open cockpit door. "You called me a quota before you even knew my name. That isn't safety. That is prejudice disguised as authority." Brock opened his mouth to argue, but Mr. Thompson cut him off, stepping forward with the grim finality of an executioner. "Captain Holloway," Thompson said, his voice hard. "Surrender your badge. You are relieved of command, effective immediately. Vista Airlines has zero tolerance for discrimination, and you have just violated that policy in front of 300 witnesses. You can't do this." Brock's voice cracked, losing its baritone confidence. He looked around at the passengers, seeking an ally, but met only cold stares and shaken heads. "I'm the best pilot you have. This is a corporate stunt. You can't fire me for being cautious." "We aren't firing you for being cautious," Maya said, holding out her open palm. "We are firing you because you think dignity is negotiable." She waited. The air crackled with tension. Reluctantly, with trembling hands, Brock reached up to his shoulders. The sound of Velcro ripping was audible in the quiet cabin as he tore off the four-striped epaulets, the symbol of his rank and pride. He dropped them into Maya's hand, looking smaller, deflated, just a man in a white shirt. Maya closed her fingers over the epaulets, then pointed firmly toward the open cabin door where the snow was still falling. She repeated the words he had thrown at her only minutes ago, reclaiming them with absolute power. "Get off my plane." Security guards moved in, gripping Brock's arms. As they dragged him toward the exit, his shock turned into frantic, ugly rage. He twisted in their grip, shouting back over his shoulder, his face twisted and red. "This is wrongful termination. You have no proof of anything. I'll sue this airline into the ground." Brock's threats echoed down the jet bridge, but inside the aircraft, Maya was already moving with the precision of a surgeon. "Mr. Thompson, show the police the file," she said, her voice devoid of anger, replaced by the cold efficiency of a prosecutor. She turned away from the door, straightening her blazer as if she had just finished a routine business meeting, rather than a confrontation that would end a man's career. Nancy, still shaken, approached her cautiously. The adrenaline was fading, leaving the crew confused. "Chairwoman," Nancy asked softly, "did you really fly all this way just to fire him because he was rude to you?" Maya shook her head, walking past the galley and back toward the cockpit, her eyes scanning the panels she had looked at earlier. "No, Nancy. I didn't come for his manners. I came for the math." She tapped the screen displaying the fuel logs and maintenance history. For 5 years, Captain Holloway has been reporting record fuel efficiency on this route. He's been getting huge performance bonuses for saving the company money. Her face hardened, but the numbers didn't add up. You can't save that much fuel in a Chicago winter unless you are cutting corners. Nancy gasped, realizing the implication. He wasn't de-icing? He was skipping the second round of de-icing fluid to pocket the budget difference, Maya confirmed, her voice grim. He was gambling with your lives and the lives of 300 passengers for a kickback. Through the cockpit window, the crew watched the scene unfolding at the gate below. 2 police officers, alerted by Mr. Thompson, intercepted Brock just as he tried to storm past the ticket counter. Thompson handed them a tablet, the evidence file Maya's team had compiled. The officers didn't hesitate. They spun Brock around, pressing him against the glass wall of the terminal. The charge wasn't just prejudice. It was grand larceny and reckless endangerment of an aircraft. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Brock slumped, the fight finally draining out of him. He wasn't going to sue anyone. He was going to prison. Maya watched for a moment, then turned her back on the window. That part of the storm was over. She slid into the left seat, the captain's seat, feeling the familiar, comforting weight of the controls. She adjusted the headset, her hands moving with love and respect over the yoke. Mr. Thompson will find us a new first officer from the reserve crew in 10 minutes, Maya announced, looking at Nancy with a warm, genuine smile. We are cleared for a full maintenance check, including a double de-icing. If we pass, we fly. I'm taking us to Chicago. Nancy wiped a tear of relief from her cheek, the tension of the night finally melting away. She nodded, standing straighter than she had in years. Yes, Captain. Drinks are on the house. Maya smiled, flipping the switches to restart the pre-flight sequence. Absolutely. The engines of the Boeing 787 roared to life, a deep, powerful hum that vibrated through the floorboards, shaking off the last of the Denver snow as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. For the first time all night, the cabin wasn't filled with the sounds of arguments or anxiety, but with the steady, reassuring rhythm of a machine in capable hands. As the plane taxied toward the runway, the blizzard clouds began to part, revealing a few determined stars blinking in the dark winter sky. Maya's voice crackled over the intercom, but this time, the tone was entirely different. Gone was the sharp authority of the prosecutor. In its place was the warm, soothing cadence of a storyteller, the kind of voice that made you feel safe at 30,000 feet. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Robinson from the flight deck. If you look out your left window, you'll see the storm has broken. We are cleared for immediate takeoff to Chicago. We're going home. A spontaneous cheer erupted in the cabin, louder and more genuine than any applause Brock had ever fished for. Inside the aircraft, the atmosphere had transformed. The tension that Brock had manufactured to divide them had evaporated, replaced by a shared sense of relief and festive spirit. Nancy moved through the aisles with a radiant smile, pouring champagne and hot cocoa for everyone, regardless of ticket class. Strangers who had been arguing about the delay hours ago were now clinking plastic cups and sharing photos of their grandchildren. The prejudice that had briefly poisoned the air had been scrubbed away, leaving only the warmth of human connection. The flight was smooth, the kind of ride pilots dream of. When the wheels finally touched down at O'Hare, the runway lights of Chicago twinkled up at them like thousands of Christmas tree ornaments scattered across the ground. As the passengers deplaned, they didn't just rush past the crew. Almost every person stopped to thank Nancy, and many peeked into the cockpit to wave at the woman sitting in the left seat. Maya stood by the cockpit door, saying goodbye to her passengers. A little girl, no older than 7, holding a worn-out teddy bear, stopped in front of her. She stared up at Maya with wide, wondrous eyes, tugging on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, is that the lady who saved Christmas?" Maya knelt down so she was eye level with the child. "I didn't save Christmas, sweetheart. I just flew the sleigh." The little girl stepped closer, whispering as if sharing a secret. "When I grow up, I want to be a pilot too. But boys say girls can't fly big planes." Maya smiled, a genuine, heartbreakingly tender expression that softened the lines of her face. She looked at the empty jet bridge where Brock had been dragged away, a relic of an old, closed-minded world, and then back at the hopeful face in front of her. "Don't you listen to them," Maya said, tucking a loose curl behind the girl's ear. "The sky is open for everyone. You just have to be brave enough to claim your wings." The girl beamed, hugging Maya tightly before skipping away down the jet bridge. Maya watched her go, feeling a peace she hadn't felt in years. The terminal was quieting down now. She grabbed her flight bag and walked through the empty gate area, her silhouette framed by the giant glass windows and the snowy night beyond. She didn't look like a billionaire CEO or a conqueror, she just looked like a pilot who had done her job. As the automatic doors slid open to the crisp winter air, she whispered to the quiet night, "Merry Christmas." As the lights of Chicago welcomed them home, we are reminded that true authority is never about the uniform we wear, but the dignity we show to others. Maya Robinson taught us that when we let go of prejudice, we clear the skies for kindness to land safely in our hearts. This Christmas, may we all look past the surface and find the hidden value in every soul we meet. If this story warmed your heart, share it to spread the light.